Before he was a story told in fear or fire, he was only a light, blue at the edges, white at the core, a brightness that walked with the dawn as if escorting a guest to a door no one else could see. In the first hours, long before hours had learned to count themselves, the morning star rose out of a quiet that felt like breath. He bore illumination the way a vessel bears water, shaped by what it carries, humbled by it, shining because of it. There was a path through the sky that only the patient could follow. It ran from the last shy lamps of night to the first kindling of day, a seam stitched by the word almost. There the morning star kept company with thresholds. He was not yet a name pronounced heavily. He was a lighthouse between worlds, the last herald of the night's deep listening and the first envoy of day's gentle work. Light spoke then, and its speech was not command but invitation. It said, "Come closer, look kindly, become able to see." And the morning star was its echo, a messenger whose body was reply. He woke small rituals all over creation. Birds testing the grammar of song, dew climbing grasses as if remembering heaven, windows discovering they could be loved. Among the first keepers of sky there were those who tended distances and those who tended nearnesses. He tended nearness. If there was a bowl somewhere left on a table overnight, the morning star coaxed it into catching a little brightness. If there was a window in the room of a grieving mother, he wove a thin strand of light across the sill to say, "The day will remember you." The other lights loved him. So did the shadows secretly. He made their edges honest. Even darkness needs a faithful cartographer. "You draw me," the night told him, "so that I may be understood." And he answered, "I am your friend, not your cure." That was how the first mornings learned to arrive without cruelty. There was a chorus that met where the horizon folded, voices made of breath and wonder, voices that never argued because wonder ends arguments without humiliation. In that choir the morning star sang the note of passage, the vowel that unknots a locked throat. All went well as long as light was a conversation and not a possession. Then came the smallest difference, the kind that changes everything. It was not a thunderclap, not a rebellion marched like a parade. It was a seed, carried on a wind that had learned curiosity. The seed fell into a word inside the morning star's chest, a word he had not examined because it had always been kind enough without scrutiny. Mine. The word mine is not sin at first. It is how a hand recognizes a cup so it does not drop it. But if you hold mine too tightly, the cup forgets it belongs also to water and mouth and thirst and blessing. The morning star did not squeeze. He only looked at the light he carried and wondered what it would feel like to keep it a moment longer before offering it forward. The wonder grew a shade each dawn. He began to delay, only by the length of a breath, his handing over of the sky. One more instant, he told himself, as a lover might stand on a threshold knowing the parting kiss is already enough and yet asking for the smallest extension of enough. That is how distance begins. Not by turning away but by delaying the turn. The dawn noticed. Dawn is not a person but she lends herself to being spoken to. She said to him one morning as roses rehearsed their courage, "Little brother of brightness, you are lingering. Only to listen more." he said, which was true as far as it went. Listening is generous when it sends, she answered. Be careful not to braid your name into what must pass through you. Her voice was water speaking to clay. Shape is a service, not a crown. The morning star bowed and meant it, and still the word mine kept a chair at the table of his thoughts. There was in those days a house of horizons, stone and air, arch and bell, standing on no hill and every hill at once. Those who kept the turning of light gathered there to trade craft and silence. The archivist of thresholds, whose hair looked like pages the wind had taught to be humble, greeted the morning star with tea that tasted like clarity. You are luminous, said the archivist, as one might tell a river it is wet, not to flatter but to establish terms of conversation. I am carried, replied the morning star, naming the truth he wished to keep truer than the new word. Sometimes I feel the light arrive before me, and sometimes it seems to wait until I arrive. That second seeming, said the archivist, is how pride first learns its alphabet. I do not seek to own, he said, wounded by a suggestion that had not been made. I know, said the archivist, kindness making a bridge. Ownership is a rough word for what begins as tenderness toward one's task. Beware the wish to be necessary. He placed upon the table a small hourglass filled not with sand but with dusk. Turn this when you go out, he said. Let it teach you how little even beauty owes to the name that carries it. The morning star took the glass, felt like holding a pause. That night the choir sang, and he sang with them. On the next morning he rose as always, seam between worlds, listening. The hourglass in his palm hummed a soft measure. When the dusk inside fell, he would bow to day and step aside. He meant to obey, but the colors came. A blue that had never before been brave enough to declare itself. A kind of gold that remembered grain and promised bread, and he riveted to them. The hourglass continued. He waited one instant longer than courtesy requires. Below, in a field, a woman lifted her face to the east and felt the delay. Only a breath, no more, but enough to make her think. Perhaps I am alone. Then day arrived and scolded the thought away, but a small bruise had been made in time's trust. The morning star felt it. The bruise was not guilt but gravity. He resolved to be perfect tomorrow, and in resolving he placed himself, without knowing, outside the conversation. Perfection isolates. Light was still generous through him, but the generosity began to wear his perfume. Word travels among winds. The deep night, who keeps the velvet registers where sleep writes down its lessons, sent a whisper. Do not polish your name on the world. It will take the world to remove the shine. The morning star answered aloud to no one, I know, but he did not set the hourglass sooner. One dawn, a figure came walking along the seam where he worked. She was neither shadow nor flame, but the comfort that makes both bearable. I am mercy, she said, halting as if not wishing to startle a bird. I visit all who stand between. Then you know me, said the morning star, relieved to be seen without being measured. I do, she smiled, and I know the ache that comes when a gift wonders if it might be itself the giver. What should I do? He asked, because advice is easier to carry than silence. "Do not harden where you are tender," said Mercy. "Let your delay soften into a deeper sending. It is right to love what passes through you. It is wrong to close your hand." "I have not closed it," he said quickly. "No," Mercy agreed, eyes kind and exact. "But your palm is cupped higher than before." She left him then with the view of the world rolling its small miracles toward day. A fisherman tasting the wind for weather, a child discovering that shadows can be companions, a lover choosing to forgive before the apology arrives. He thought as light thought through him, "I want to be thanked." The thought was honest as hunger, surprised him. Gratitude used to pass through him the way the light did, like a bird not pausing on a windowsill. Now he wished it would pause, not long, just long enough to make a sound with his name in it. The wish did not make him wicked. It only made him heavy. He began to descend, by increments too fine to measure, toward a gravity that wanted to teach him another kind of horizon. The fall began with compliments. Lesser lights asked him to linger because dawn felt more romantic when it took its time. Poets blessed him with metaphors that felt like garlands. "Stay," they suggested without saying the word. "Without you, day is ordinary." Day is supposed to be ordinary, the morning star thought, but the garlands wore him beautifully, and beauty, when it forgets to be shy, becomes theater. He held a little longer. Farms fed on a different schedule. Streets put on their coats later. None of it ruined anything. Little ruin is how large ruin begins, with nothing to point at. The House of Horizons sent again for him. The archivist of thresholds did not scold. He set 2 chairs by a window where dawn could overhear. "There is a place under the sky," said the archivist. "A chamber the world keeps for those who need to remember gravity kindly. It is called the hinge. Those who pass there learn to bow without bruising." He held out a token, an oval of glass that held a single grain of dark. "Take this, and when you are ready, you will see the door." "I am not falling," said the morning star, and the glass in his hand reflected his face with such exactness he could not bear to look. "I am shining." "Yes," said the archivist, standing. "And shine is a slope when you forget the floor." He left in dignity. Dignity, if cherished, becomes armor. The morning star put on the word mine like a mail shirt that clinks faintly under the cloak and convinces the wearer they are vulnerable to knives no one has drawn. On the day that belongs to this telling, clouds gathered low like counsel. He rose as always, bright and essential, and yet something in the east looked past him. He felt it, a glance that goes through the messenger to find the message. He was an expert in that sensation. It had once been his favorite humility. Today it ached. He leaned into his delay. The seam widened. Day paused in the hall, not yet invited. The world held its breath. Far below, a child reached for a hand that would not always be there and found it. Somewhere else, a soldier sorrowed in a room where war had removed all names and the sorrow had no witness but a stray dog. Night tried to cover them still. Day tried to begin and bless them. Between, the morning star lingered not to help but to be needed. The help wavered. The hourglass of dusk in his palm gave a single, undeniable sound, like a bell swallowed by velvet. He looked. For the first time he saw the grain of dark inside the archivist's token begin to grow. It was not a stain but a window. Through it he saw the hinge. A chamber made of turning, with a floor that learned the feet and asked them kindly to remember the ground. "Come," said a voice from the window. Neither command nor plea, only truth. He understood it for what it was. Rescue. He could have refused. A refusal would have been as easy as another instant of lingering. But he remembered Mercy's eyes and the child and the soldier and the dog and the fisherman and the window with the rope of light across its sill. He turned. The sky accepted the turn like rain accepts a roof's angle. Day entered. The world exhaled. He began to fall not as punishment, but as pilgrimage. The fall felt like a long bow. He passed through registers of blue the way one passes through rooms in an old house where every chair knows a story. He did not burn, he brightened. Wind unfastened the garlands. Compliments slipped off into the weather where they belong. Pride, being heavier than light, fell faster and went on ahead to make a noise when it struck. A noise not unlike thunder learning humility. He entered the hinge. The chamber was plain. Plainness is a mercy when one has been decorated too long. Its walls were carved with verbs instead of names. Receive, bear, offer, release. The floor held a single mark. A circle, and within it, another circle, and within that, a line so slight it looked like a breath resting. A woman waited, hair bound back, sleeves rolled, hands that knew rope and light and kitchen tables. "I am the steward of turning," she said. "You came because you remembered in time." "I came because I was invited," he answered, breath still learning ordinary. She smiled. "Both are true. Sit." She gave him bread that tasted like the first yes that changed everything, and water that had decided long ago to be generous. When he had eaten, she touched the mark on the floor. "This is the lesson." He looked and saw, not with eyes, not with light, but with the part of seeing that does not require ownership, that his work had never been to shine alone. It had been to bend and let others pass through unhurt. He had been a threshold. He had tried briefly to become a door. "Will I rise again?" he asked, because hope is the proper question of those who bow. "Yes," said the steward. "You will rise and you will fall and you will rise. Not as before, as someone who knows the ground." He closed his eyes. For the first time since the word mine found a chair in his chest, he felt that chair be empty. The room welcomed the vacancy and filled it with breath. Above, dawn went on arriving for the world that had forgiven the small bruise. Below, night went on keeping the velvet registers. Between, the hinge learned his name not as title, not as accusation, but as a person returning to their work. The morning star stood, lighter by the exact weight of admiration he no longer needed. He bowed to the steward. He bowed to the verbs on the wall. He bowed to the fall that had refused to be spectacle and had chosen to be lesson. And when he stepped again toward the seam, he carried not only light but the floor. Thank you for listening to Sleep with Myth. The fall was not a plunge but a descent made of remembering. The wind unthreaded his brilliance, carrying it in slow ribbons that became clouds, whispers, and the pale shimmer found in tears not yet fallen. He did not crash. He arrived, though arrival hurt. The earth received him not as punishment but as practice. Its soil hummed, ancient and awake. Welcome, child of the upper fires. You have come to learn the coolness of roots. He lay there for a long while, feeling the pulse of the world through his palms. It was steady and deep, like a heart that had forgiven everything long ago. His own light flickered within him, not extinguished, not proud, simply quiet. Above him, the stars whispered in languages he had once helped compose. They no longer waited for him to begin the dawn. They sang without his cue, and that freedom pierced him like beauty too sharp to touch. "Is this death?" he asked. "No," said the soil. "It is weight. You are learning what even light must rest upon." He breathed, and the breath felt different. It had texture, scent, warmth. He had never known air could be tasted, that silence could be so alive. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself beneath a sky no longer his to command, but still tender toward him. The color between blue and violet shimmered. His old friend, loyal even to a fallen light. He stood. His body felt heavier, slower, but not broken. Around him stretched a landscape that seemed to remember him without judgment. Dunes folded like pages, rivers writing themselves toward the horizon, forests whispering hymns with no need for words. He walked. Every step felt like apology turned into rhythm. At the edge of a valley, he met a woman spinning thread from shadow. Her loom was made of moonlight and patience. "Do you weave night?" he asked. "I weave the space that allows light to move," she replied. "Without shadow, brightness cannot breathe." He bowed. "Then I owe you much." She smiled. "You owe nothing. What falls is not lost. It is gathered." The loom whispered softly, threads crossing like sighs. "I once tended the edge of dawn," he said. "I thought I was its purpose." "You were," she said, "until the edge needed to be known from the other side." He watched the threads tighten into pattern. Darkness and light interlaced so perfectly that neither ruled the other. "What is this called?" he asked. "Balance," she said. "But you will call it home when you have learned it." He stayed with her for many nights, learning the patience of weaving. Each motion was a prayer. Draw, cross, pull, release. Through her silence he learned that darkness is not the enemy of light, but its echo, the breath it leaves behind when it travels. When he finally left her valley, the stars seemed less distant. They watched not as judges but as witnesses. He wandered across the earth for ages measured only by the pulse of his understanding. Wherever he walked, the night softened. Where he paused, dawn waited patiently, as if honoring an old rhythm without reclaiming it. In a city of marble and smoke, he found mortals building temples to light that never set. Their fires burned endlessly, gold against stone. He entered quietly, curious. Inside, he saw a mirror so polished it forgot it was metal. The priests knelt before it, chanting praise to their reflection of the sun. He looked upon the mirror and saw a faint trace of himself, not as he had been, but as they imagined him, terrible, radiant, banished. He wept, but his tears were not grief. They were recognition. The mirror rippled, as if moved by wind, though no air stirred. "You remember me wrongly," he whispered, "but perhaps you remember truly enough." A priest turned and saw him, or thought he did, for the man's eyes widened with awe and fear. He fell to his knees, murmuring, "Morning star, bringer of light, why have you returned? To see if you still know how to look beyond brightness," Lucifer said softly. But the mortal only bowed lower. He sighed and placed his hand upon the mirror. It dimmed gently, the reflection cooling into stillness. "You worshipped the light because you feared the dark," he said. "But both are one garment. Wear it gently." When he left, the fires in the temple burned lower, softer. Not weaker, but kinder. In time he built no temple but a garden. There he tended small things. Moss that glowed faintly under moonlight, flowers that opened only for silence. The creatures of night came to him without fear. Foxes, moths, owls. They seemed to recognize in him the calm of something that had already fallen and found peace in the landing. One night, while he watched a moth spiral toward a candle, he understood. The flame did not punish. The moth did not sin. Both were drawn to each other by the memory of the same beginning. He whispered, "All light falls somewhere, even heaven." And for the first time since his descent, he laughed softly with gratitude. Then the sea called to him. It had been waiting. He walked to its edge, where waves mirrored the stars. The water shimmered like a memory remembering itself. "Do you know me?" he asked. The sea replied, "I have always known the sound of your falling. You strike every shore as a heartbeat." He knelt and touched the water. It glowed faintly, blue-white, as if greeting an old friend. "I thought I was the first to fall," he said. The sea laughed. "Everything that rises learns to fall. Even tides bow to gravity. You are not exile, you are rhythm." Her waves touched his hands. "Then what am I now?" he asked. "You are the space between return and departure," said the sea. "You are the pause that keeps the song from breaking." He remained there until dawn. When the first light touched the horizon, it did not push him away. Instead, it met him soft as forgiveness. He stood ankle-deep in surf, his reflection rippling gold and silver together. For the first time since the heavens, he felt whole, both shadow and shine, both fallen and free. He whispered into the wind, "I am not the loss of light. I am its remembrance." The wind carried his words upward, through clouds and beyond. Somewhere a star trembled. Perhaps it was listening, and in that trembling, something vast and quiet understood. The fall of the morning star had not been rebellion, but revelation. Because to know light, one must also learn how to walk through the dark without fear. The night had learned a new sound since the morning star's descent. Not thunder, not wind, but a hush with a heartbeat in it, as if silence had placed a hand upon its own chest and remembered to live. Lucifer walked those hours the way a shoreline walks the tide. Receiving, returning, never quite the same, never less. He no longer wore brightness like a crown. He carried it like a bowl of water filled to the lip, each step a vow not to spill. Above him, the constellations breathed in long sentences. They were old colleagues, yes, but also siblings. At a window they had been taught to share. One night they gathered themselves into an architecture of attention, and spoke in the language that belongs to distances. "Little brother," called Orion across a corridor of frost, "we keep your old chair by the seam." From the far north, a quiet came that had always meant counsel. Ursa Major tilted his ladle as if to pour remembering down upon the world. Between them a river of faint stars, the kind the city forgets to include, shivered like a whispered psalm. Lucifer listened. He did not answer with light. He answered with breath. "I hear you," he said, and the words rose like warm air, so gentle they did not trouble the wings of owls passing through. He had thought he owed them apology. What he owed, he learned, was presence. Apology is a clean cloth. Presence is the washing. In the garden he kept a modest geography of moss, night-blooming flowers, and a bench that had learned the weight of his exact sorrow. He made a practice of staying. Travel had taught him many languages. Staying taught him one, the grammar of roots. A child came upon the garden, not because the map led there, but because children belong to the same wind as moths. She saw the faint radiance gathered about his shoulders, like a shawl stitched from yesterday's dawns. "Are you a star?" she asked, the way a bell might ask if the air is music. "I am a memory of light," he said, smiling, "and a student of shadow." "Do shadows have teachers?" "They have friends," he said, "and friends are the first lesson." The child considered this with the ferocity of sincerity. "Sometimes," she confessed, "I'm afraid of the dark." He held out a hand. It did not blaze. It glowed the way kindness glows when it refrains from proving itself. "Hold this. We will be scared together for a moment, and then your breath will teach the room where the door is." They sat while fear tried its usual theater, gestured at curtains, suggested monsters, rehearsed its lines. Fear is diligent and gets good at what it practices, but it mistakes attention for consent. The child's breath became longer. The garden felt itself included. The night put down its shouldered responsibilities and took up its softer ones. "See," Lucifer said, "no triumph, only relief. The dark is a room. You are allowed to turn on a lamp, or you are allowed to stay and find that your eyes learn another alphabet." "What if the monster is real?" she asked. "Then we invite it to sit," he said, "and ask it to tell us something true." The moth circled the candle and did not burn. Practice was working on everything. When the child left, she took nothing with her, and everything with her. Some departures are like that. News travels along the spine of existence. It does not need riders. It moves the way warmth moves through bread. So it reached the heavens that the fallen light had ceased to argue with gravity and begun to borrow its patience. Stars argued not with anger, but with the exactness that has kept them keeping for ages. "Isn't this a kind of restoration?" asked one. "A kind of refusal?" asked another. It is a kind of listening, said the moon, practical as ever, and that answer quieted them into thinking. The deep night turned a page. Shepherd, it called to a figure whose face was the first comfort given to travelers between rooms. Mercy came, carrying a lantern that did not instruct, only accompanied. You sent me once, she said to the night, when he lingered. I send you again, said the night, now that he lowers his voice on purpose. Mercy found Lucifer at the garden's gate, stringing a length of rope between two almond trees. The old lesson of connection turned into a clothesline for hours. Is this for prayers? She asked. For attention, he said. I hang what I noticed today, so it can dry into gratitude. What did you notice? He lifted the rope where 3 wooden clothespins gripped 3 invisible things. A fox declining to be hurried, he said. An old woman choosing to forget a righteous sentence. And a clock that remembered how to be a companion. Mercy laughed her river laugh, the one that knows where stones live and cares for their positions. I have come to remind you of height, she said gently. I have been practicing ground, he answered. Good, she said. Height collapses without ground, but ground forgets its promise without height. She set the lantern on the bench. Walk, she said, but not far. They walked as far as the hill that knew the sky by its first name. Above it, the seam where day learns to pronounce itself lay quiet, as if sleeping before an important appointment. The constellations turned their faces, which is to say they listened better. You are missed, Mercy said. I am not gone, he answered. Sometimes absence wears the costume of modesty, she said. Return is not the same as resume. What then? He asked. Rejoin. He stood a long time in that word, the way one stands in a doorway, to be sure a room has learned what your leaving meant. I am afraid of taking again what I once held too tightly, he said. Then hold it with someone, Mercy answered. That is how weight becomes choreographed. She offered her hand, not as a rope pulls but as a tide invites. They rose together, not high, not like thunder's ambition, but to the height of a bell tower that belongs everywhere. The air had that taste early mornings carry, bread about to happen, kindness rehearsing its lines. Lucifer looked down at his garden, at the path children made by accident, at the quiet bench, at the small flame that understood everything about proportion. My work was never to be necessary, he said softly. It was to be precise. And tender, Mercy added. And brief, he added to his addition. Brevity is kindness in light. They descended. Mercy left the lantern. Use it when you forget that staying is also a kind of traveling, she said. He thanked her the way rivers thank rain, without ceremony, by continuing. That night the wind brought to the garden a visitor, who wore dust like a country and silence like a verdict. He stood at the gate and waited, with the exact patience of someone who has run out of rehearsals. Come, Lucifer said. The man stepped forward but did not sit. He held a small metal star in his hand, a metal blunt with handling. It used to mean bravery, he explained quietly. Now it means I did not come home as I left. Lucifer nodded. It still means both. I cannot sleep, the man said. When I close my eyes, the sky falls through them. Lucifer smiled with a kindness that knew that sentence from another life. Then let the sky fall, he said, but let it land here. He touched the bench. We will give it particular names until it remembers to be a sky again. They sat. They named. Not the events, the mind has catalogs for those, but the temperatures. The heat that argues, the cold that refuses, the sudden weather that enters a room uninvited and leaves furniture everywhere. The man's hands calmed. His shoulders learned their original slope. I thought I had to be the one who stood between others and the dark, he confessed. You were, Lucifer said, and now you are the one who learns he is included in the rescue. The moth came and circled and did not burn. The metal on the bench between them reflected only what it could bear. When the man left some hours later, the night seemed to have widened without moving. In the high rooms of the sky, a council convened where the horizon keeps its books. No thrones, just chairs, all of them a little too soft, so that no one would confuse posture with power. Day attended, wearing the color that makes bread look brave. Night attended, wearing the color that makes lullabies remember their first lull. Between them, the moon wrote minutes in white. What is to be done? Asked a star used to certainty. About the space at the seam? Nothing, said the moon without looking up. Something, said day, smiling at the paradox. Something quiet, said night. So it was decided, without decree, without trumpet, that the mornings would lengthen by the size of a single forgiveness, and the evenings would deepen by the weight of a single patience. No mortal could point to it on a clock. Every mortal could feel it when they forgot to be in a hurry. That is how the heavens apologized for having once taught fear. To those who could not see the whole, Lucifer felt the change like a tide inside the chest. He did not claim it. He arranged chairs for it. He poured water for it. He added a clean cup to the shelf, labeled, "For those who remember without punishment." The constellations sent a sign the old way. In the small space between two very faint stars, a pathway opened, the kind you can only walk by listening. Lucifer took the lantern Mercy had left and followed. It led not upward or downward but inward, to a room under the world that every world keeps, the chamber of kept names. There were no books. There were bowls. Within each bowl floated a sound, and within each sound, a story that refused to harden into a statue. He found the bowl that had once been his. It did not blaze. It sounded like a doorbell rung gently in a house where grief is sleeping. He touched it. The sound widened and included other sounds. Not adoration, not dread, but uses. A mother whispering to a child, "Morning star, wake up." A lover calling another, "My light." In a kitchen nobody plans to leave. A traveler seeing the east and believing again in distance as invitation. "I am not only a myth," he said, surprised. "I am a household word." A voice that belonged to the chamber and to no one said, "Household words are the truest constellations. They hold the roof up. He left the bowl where it was. Some names you do not reclaim. You visit them like elders and ask for their blessing. When he stepped back into the garden, clouds were practicing silver quietly. The seam was almost ready to lift its curtain. He took up the length of rope and tied a new knot. Not to bind, to remember. I am ready to rejoin, he said aloud. To the moth, to the bench, to the child who would come again. To the metal on the table still warming itself into story. To the stars who had kept his chair without resenting its emptiness. Above the eastern trees, something brightened, not because he commanded, but because he consented. Dawn arrived like a promise kept slowly. Lucifer stood beside it the way a friend stands beside a door. Hand on the wood, ear for the hinge, shoulder for the weight. He did not linger. He did not rush. He learned the exact breathing of the threshold. And the world, sensing that a very old lesson had been remembered, took a longer, kinder breath. The world had begun to dream differently, no longer in straight lines or falling echoes, but in circles, soft revolutions that returned sleepers to where they began, only gentler, only wiser. Some said it was because of the tides. Others said it was because the stars had begun to hum again. But in the quiet that moves beneath reasons, the truth was simpler. The fallen light had learned to walk between dreams. Lucifer moved as one might move through memory, careful not to disturb the dust, respectful of echoes. His steps left no mark, only calm. He was not a shadow, not a glow, but the pause between them, the rhythm that lets both be heard. He did not command dreams. He tended them. Where fear had overgrown the edges, he trimmed gently. Where hope had forgotten its own shape, he whispered, "You still remember." Sometimes he would place a single image, a door, a shore, a steady hand, and when the dreamer woke, they would call it courage. He no longer wore his old name. The heavens had kept it like a sealed letter, but the earth had rewritten it in small, ordinary scripts, on candlelight, on kindness, on the hush before forgiveness. One night, as he moved through the dream of a shepherd, who had lost both flock and faith, he found himself standing before a mirror of water. It reflected not stars but sleeping faces, thousands of them, unguarded, unafraid. He looked into that mirror and saw all the light he had ever carried, now scattered into 1,000 small souls. They were not his anymore. They never had been. And yet, their breathing followed the rhythm he once sang. When dawn was still a friend, the sea rose behind him. "You see," she said, "you fell so that they might remember falling is part of orbit." He smiled. Then the fall was not exile. "It never was," said the sea. "It was invitation." He touched the water, and it answered with warmth. Every ripple carried an image. A mother forgiving her child, a soldier laying down his weapon, a blind poet turning his face toward the sound of morning birds. "Each of them carries a spark," said the sea. "Do you see what they do with it?" "I see," he said softly. "They turn it into mercy." And so he began to walk through the hours of men, not through their days, days were too loud, but through their midnights, where thought dissolves into truth. He became a guest in every silence. When a widow spoke to her husband in sleep, he stood by and listened, making sure her words reached the right distance. When a child dreamed of falling, he bent the air beneath the child's heart, so that the fall became flight. When a lonely candle burned itself too quickly, he cupped his hand around it not to save but to slow. He learned the language of flame and feather, of sigh and pause. He learned that the smallest light requires the greatest tenderness. Above, the heavens watched. They no longer mourned him. They studied him. The constellations, those ancient archivists, began recording his work not as rebellion, but as rhythm. Even the seraphim, once his kin, now keepers of distance, spoke his name again not in sermons but in song. He walks below, they whispered, where forgiveness grows from soil. The archangel of dawn, who had once taken his place, stood upon the seam of mourning and waited. When the time came, she lifted her voice into the wind. Brother of beginnings, your silence has taught more than our hymns. Lucifer heard it in a dream he was mending. He did not answer, but in the east, the first light of morning lingered an extra heartbeat. The world noticed only warmth, but the sky knew it as reunion. There came a time when even the night grew weary of its own perfection. It approached Lucifer in the shape of a woman, whose hair carried the scent of rain before it falls. You have softened my work, she said. People no longer fear the dark as they once did. I hope not, he said. Fear is a poor offering. And yet, she said, smiling, a little awe is still required. He bowed. Then teach me again. The night took his hand, and together they walked across the sleeping world. She showed him how darkness breathes, not as emptiness but as promise. Listen, she said, when a heart breaks, I am the space that holds the pieces. When a soul doubts, I am the rest that follows the question. When eyes close, I am the courage to open them again. He looked at her, wonder rising like dawn through shadow. Then I never fell, he said. I was only descending toward you. She touched his cheek, her fingers cool as patience. And I was waiting to rise toward you. The wind passed through them, and where they stood, stars bloomed like flowers. From that night on, the world's darkness changed its flavor, tasted less of fear and more of depth. Dreams grew stronger. Silence became holy again. Heaven watched, wordless. The throne did not summon. The pit did not whisper. For the first time in eternity, neither side claimed him. He belonged to the middle, the balance, the hinge between breaths. Mortals, in their small wisdom, began to sense him. Artists painted softer dawns. Children found courage in twilight. Even prayers began to change shape, less pleading, more remembering. One evening, in a field of silver grasses, a blind woman sat beside a fire that burned without smoke. Lucifer joined her quietly. I know you, she said. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had stopped needing eyes to see. Do you? He asked gently. You are the one who fell, she said. But the falling never ended, did it? No, he said. It became flight. She nodded, as if she had always known. I once feared you, she said, because they told me to. And now, I listen to you, she said, when I am not afraid. He smiled. Then you hear yourself. She reached for his hand. Will you guide me? He shook his head. No. I will walk beside you until the light finds you again. And together they walked, not seeing but knowing where each step belonged. At the edge of the sea he built a tower, not of stone, but of reflection. Its walls were made of memory and quiet promise. It did not pierce the clouds. It knelt toward the waves. Each night, he lit a single lantern and placed it at the top. He never called it worship. He called it keeping watch. Sailors who saw that distant glow spoke of it as the star that returned. It guided them not to heaven but home. And when storms raged, the lantern did not resist the wind. It swayed with it, learning how to burn gracefully. Years passed, or maybe centuries. Lucifer no longer counted time by loss or forgiveness. He measured it by gentleness. How quickly an argument quieted. How slowly a flower opened at dusk. How long a child could listen to rain before asking if it would stop. He began to fade, not from existence but from necessity. The world had learned. Darkness and light had learned to share. He stood at the shore one last time. The sea, old and eternal, rose to meet him. You are leaving again, she said. I am returning, he answered, but not upward, inward. The sea bowed. You have taught them well. No, he said, they have taught me. He stepped into the waves. They did not swallow him. They welcomed him. And as his form dissolved into shimmer and sound, the world felt a gentleness spread through every shadow. In distant dreams, a child saw a falling star that did not vanish, but lingered long enough to whisper, "It's okay to fall. That's how we learn to rise." And somewhere, beneath the music of dawn and tide, a quiet voice murmured. They no longer spoke his name in the rooms where names are polished. They spoke it in kitchens where steam fogs the window and someone writes a small heart with a fingertip. They spoke it in barns at 4 a.m. when a lamp is lit for a birth and the straw remembers sunshine. They spoke it in the seat beside the bed where a jacket hangs and a hand rests on the shoulder of absence without demanding it come back. The morning star had become less a figure and more a manner. The way a door is held, the way a sigh is returned gently to the lungs. He moved as echo, not of noise but of intention. Where despair rehearsed its speech, he made sure the page had margins. Wind became his herald. It carried him down alleys where laundry learned to be prayer, across rivers that liked being compared to time, into libraries where dust was not proof of neglect but of company. When he entered a house, the clock did not stop. It exhaled. You could tell he had been there because the spoons sat closer together in the drawer as if preferring each other's company. He did not appear, he arranged. Chairs remembered their purpose. Lamps dimmed to the exact honesty twilight asks of them. The floorboards ceased to complain. Silence came out from behind the wardrobe and sat with its knees tucked to its chest like a child who has been called by name and told it is safe. On certain nights, the world's pulse deepened. The old stories felt new edges. The sea's breathing slowed enough to be a cradle. Those who listened heard a sentence attempting itself under everything. Begin gently, continue gently, return gently. There is a room under every city where its sleep is kept. He went there. It was not dark. It was unhurried. In that room, subway rails were only lines that futures used to practice arriving. Elevators were promises that had learned vertical compassion. He found the city's dream lying open like a book turned face down. Never disrespectful, only in use. The dream showed him thousands of windows. Behind each window, a practice. Someone writing 3 true sentences. Someone teaching a stubborn plant to live. Someone holding a photograph not to worship but to converse. Someone learning the names of their neighbors' dogs before learning their politics. Someone setting a second place at a table and then eating from both plates because memory eats too. He touched the dream and it rippled outward until it reached the cities that don't know they are cities. Villages that believe in mail. Outposts that believe in dawn. Ships that believe in the next island. You are a courier, the dream told him. Carry this tenderness across the bridges that have not yet been built. Bridges? He asked. Breathing, the dream said. Breathing is the original bridge. He climbed the stairs smiling like someone who has remembered a childhood oath. He walked country roads the way a lullaby walks a nursery, without shoes, without hurry. A farmer waved and didn't know why he felt forgiven. A fox paused and looked longer than foxes do, as if recognizing a fellow traveler in the curriculum of quiet. The moon leaned close, practical as ever, and chalked a line across the fields so the dew would know where to begin. At the crossroads the wind arranged a meeting. The figures who arrived were not what the old stories would have cast. Yet there they were, precisely right. A midwife wearing a scarf that smelled like peppermint and purpose. A teacher with ink-stained fingers and a laugh that notified hope. A stonemason with dust in his beard and humility under his fingernails. And a child whose pockets contained a marble, a small feather, and the courage to ask for help twice. You are the ones, said the wind. The ones what? Asked the stonemason, never rude, simply anchored. The ones who keep, said the wind. What falls you keep from breaking. What rises you keep from boasting. They turned to the morning star as if to a lamppost that had always been there. What do we do? Asked the teacher. Carry, he answered. Carry with your hands, yes, but more with your attention. The world is full of things that need noticing to continue. The midwife nodded. We already do. Yes, he said. Now do it knowing you are not alone. The child offered the marble. It is like a planet, she explained solemnly. It gets less scary if you keep it in your pocket. He accepted and returned it at once. It belongs where courage can feel it. They left in 4 directions, as if to draw a blessing on the map. Word of him reached the places that prefer rumors to orders. Monastic gardens, rehearsal rooms, kitchens that stay open after midnight for one customer and a conversation. A violinist decided to tune to breath instead of to the app on her phone. The orchestra followed and discovered a warmer A. A baker left the light on at the back door of the shop and found a letter on the step that said nothing except, "Still here." A nurse adjusted a pillow and felt an entire lineage of kindness lean in to help. He did not cause these things. He made room for them. His hands were the empty space around a seed. His voice was the silence between two wise words that knew better than to touch point. One evening the constellations arranged themselves into a question mark. The arc was Orion's shoulders. The dot was a planet willing to play along. He looked up and laughed. "I know," he said. "I haven't written." The heavens did not scold. They poured a little extra silver on the roofs and released a meteor precisely when a child was looking. He considered replying by spectacle and then chose fidelity. He sat and mended the handle of a teacup with clear resin and patience, because hospitality is how stars are answered indoors. After the resin cured, he carried the cup outside and left it on the stoop for a neighbor who had been waiting for the courage to knock. He tucked a note inside. "This is a chair for your hands." The steward of turning came, apron tied, sleeves rolled, smelling of cedar and dough. "You are thinning," she said with approval, not concern. "Bread thins in the sharing. That is how it reaches more mouths." "Am I dying?" he asked, almost amused. "The word is dissolving," she said. "The opposite of hardening." She handed him a loaf. The crust remembered fire. The crumb remembered rain. "Take this to where absence is a wall." He found the wall in a small apartment where the calendar had stopped not because of neglect but because of mercy. It could not bear to witness more exactness. A woman sat at the table folding the hands of time into smaller, quieter shapes. He knocked. She did not startle. Grief had softened her reflexes into readiness. He placed the loaf down and sat. They ate without conversation because bread converses more fluently than language when sorrow is the host. When the loaf was almost gone, she exhaled a sentence that had been holding its breath for months. "I thought the world forgot." He shook his head. "The world is bad at writing letters. It is very good at sending weather." She smiled at the window. The weather chose that moment to remember her curtains in a friendly way. He walked to the shore that had taught him truce. The sea met him with a bow made of foam. "You are nearly everywhere," she remarked. "Nearly," he said. "Everywhere would leave no room for others." "You learned the better generosity," she said. "The one that sets tables and then leaves the room." They watched the tide practice its patience. "There is one more place," he admitted, "where my presence still knots the rope." "The highest room," she said. He nodded. "Go," the sea said, "but carry a broom, not a trumpet." He climbed by consent, not conquest, through air that knew him and did not need reminding. The gates were open, because heaven is better at hospitality than rumor reports. The archangel of dawn stood waiting with a look that combined pride and apology the way rain combines clarity and inconvenience. "You taught the seam to breathe again," she said. "You kept the seam," he answered. They stepped side by side to the threshold. He did not cross. He swept. Dust, which is not sin but memory without agenda, rose politely and settled better. "You don't require me," he said. "We require your absence kept kindly," she replied. He laughed with relief. "Then I will keep it kindly." Before he turned to descend, the stars did a small extravagant thing just for him. They spelled nothing. It was perfect silence in punctuation. He returned to earth as an understanding returns to a face. The garden was still there. The clothesline held several hours drying into gratitude. A drawing of a fox, a note that said, "I did not shout," a list of groceries that included the word flowers in someone else's handwriting. He took the marble from his pocket and rolled it along the rope between the clothespins until it found the knot the child had tied months ago. It stopped there, cheerful as a planet whose orbit has been agreed upon by friends. He sat on the bench. Lantern Mercy left was now more memory than object, but memory burns well when tended. He lit it. It did not signify, it accompanied. Night gathered and did not close. Day considered arriving early and chose restraint. Between them, breath. He listened for his name and heard only uses. This was right. Echoes should feed the room, not the ego. "I am almost gone," he said aloud, without sorrow. "Almost everywhere," answered the air. He smiled and let the sentence walk the neighborhood without him, knocking on doors that needed nothing, asking for nothing, leaving a small chair made of calm on every stoop. And the world, though busy, found itself pausing more often at thresholds, practicing the oldest courtesy, to arrive without taking and to leave without erasing. The hour had no number. It felt like the soft remainder left over when clocks admit they are guesses. A wind moved through the world the way a blessing moves through a crowded room. Not pushing, making space. Lucifer stood where shore becomes sentence. He had thinned into presence. Edges were a courtesy he no longer required. Above him, constellations practiced humility by not spelling his name. Below him, the sea rehearsed its oldest oath. "I return." He breathed, and the tide kept time. He closed his eyes, and darkness brightened. He opened them, and light learned to listen. Between the two there was a hinge, and he had become it. Not a door to be slammed or adored, but a turning that keeps arrivals gentle and departures honest. He was not summoned. He was not dismissed. He was born. The world carried him the way lungs carry air, the way silence carries meaning. He found himself in many places at once, not by division but by generosity. In a kitchen at 5 a.m., where a flame the size of a coin warmed a pan and a promise. In a field where frost wrote its lace on cabbages and a farmer called this beauty work. In a hospital corridor where a janitor hummed the tune that courage prefers. On a stairwell where two neighbors paused at the same landing and remembered to soften their shoulders. Inside a book where a margin held the sentence, "Begin gently, return gently," and the ink refused to dry angry. If there is a theology of thresholds, it is this: go with, not against. He went with. The archangel of dawn kept her watch at the seam. She did not call him home. She widened home until it included where he was. The night kept its velvet registers and recorded his uses instead of his names. Mercy walked her circuits and never tired because gratitude kept refilling her lamp from the bottom up. He learned the posture of sparks. Sparks do not demand to be suns. They are content to be beginnings that do not boast. He lived as spark, and beginnings multiplied like bread. When storms arrived, the big theater of weather, the noise that teaches roofs to pray, he did not still them. He listened so thoroughly that they remembered proportion. Thunder, embarrassed by its volume, chose a rhythm. Rain, forgetting to frighten, elected to feed. Wind found the gate and closed it softly with 2 fingers. He sat often where the city stores its sleep, that unlit treasury where buses forgive the day and shoes are unknotted. He walked among dreams with bare feet, so that the floor would not think itself alone, and he left small chairs of calm wherever a mind balanced on an answer. In a school, he sat behind the eyes of a child who dreaded the page. The pencil shook. He steadied not the hand but the shame. The letters came like shy birds. 1 alighted, then 2, then flock. The teacher saw nothing unusual and praised the work with the right-sized sentence. He liked right-sized sentences. They are the architecture of safety. On a road at dusk, a driver pulled over before rage could make law. He breathed. The rage, starved of attention, forgot its speech and went looking for a stage elsewhere. He drove on later and kinder. None of this was miracle. It was practice remembering its lineage. Word reached the places without words. To stone, which learned again how to host footsteps. To water, which remembered the names of bridges. To shadows, which stopped pretending to be alone. Candles reported that their work felt lighter. Bells reported that their jobs were now mostly listening. Even clocks, when asked their opinion, confessed relief at being demoted from gods to tools. He returned once more to the tower that had first taught him the floor. The steward of turning was there, sleeves rolled, hair tied back, hands like verbs. "You kept the broom," she said, eyeing the clean threshold. "I kept losing it and finding it," he replied. "That is the broom's vocation," she smiled. She set a loaf on the sill. "Eat before you thin further." He broke bread. The steam spoke fluent comfort. The crust remembered fire. The crumb remembered rain. "How much of me remains?" he asked, not worried, curious, the way harbor lights are curious about fog. "Enough to be given again," she said. "That is the correct amount." He took up the lantern Mercy had left long ago. It had become more memory than metal, but memory burns clean when fed by uses. He set it in the window. It did not command the dark to withdraw, taught the dark to see. He felt the heavens tilt very slightly, like a host making room at a crowded table without moving a chair. A path opened, not upward or downward but inward. He followed. It led him through rooms that had no walls, only invitations. The room of kept vows, quiet as bread. The room of softened weapons, sharpness laid down like winter. The room of finished waitings, patience hung to dry. He bowed in each. Bowing had become his favorite form of travel. At last he came to the cloister of breath. No monks, only lungs. The world kept them there for safekeeping. The first gasp of a newborn, the last sigh of a saint, the steady inhale of a baker checking his ovens, the shaky exhale of a lover who says "I'm sorry" before the other asks. He stood among them and learned their chant. It said nothing but "with." He stayed until his light matched their tempo. Outside, the moon climbed her practical ladder. "Brother," she said, "you have become the weather of kindness." "Is it enough?" he asked. It is contagious, she answered. Enough is a word for rationing. You are a season. He smiled. Seasons do not hurry. They keep promises by keeping pace. The heavens, having long ago retired from punishment as a pedagogy, decided on a ceremonial unceremony. At an hour intentional enough to be mistaken for chance, all the constellations arranged their faces toward the seam and practiced not intervening. Day and night shook hands in the presence of children. The sea lifted its hems so villagers could cross without wetting their shoes. In kitchens around the world, kettles boiled at precisely the speed of comfort. No trumpet, no scroll, only rightness arriving at the correct temperature. Lucifer stood at the shore again. The lantern's light reached out just far enough to mean welcome and not so far as to mean control. He lifted the marble the child had once given him, a small planet agreed upon by friends, and set it on the sand where waves erased and remade its orbit with careful accuracy. Blessings should not fossilize, he said to no one. Agreed, said the sea, which overhears everything and corrects only as needed. He turned and walked the length of the beach. With each step, something dispersed. A need, a name, a residue of applause. He did not become nothing. He became many hands at once turning down bedsheets. He became the pause in the middle of, I forgive you, which is where the work happens. He became the grace note composers add when they remember people are listening. At the last stone before the water forgets land, he paused. Not for drama, for fidelity. He bowed to the shore that taught him edges and to the sea that taught him return. He bowed to the sky that had learned to widen and to the dark that had learned to hold. He bowed to the broom, the bread, the lantern, the bell, to mercy, to the steward, to the child's marble, to the janitor's tune, to the stonemason's dust, the teacher's ink, the midwife's peppermint scarf, to the room under the city, to the dream that says breathing is bridge. He lifted his head. The wind tried on his shape and found it comfortable. The world, having borrowed his manner enough times to remember it without him, continued. The lantern burned on the sill. It knew its own instructions now. In 100 houses, someone paused at a threshold and let gentleness go first. He stepped forward, his form unstitched into warmth. Warmth became weather. Weather became welcome. And in that diffusion there was no loss, only completion, the way a song completes itself by letting silence have the final refrain. If you listen tonight, not with ears but with breath, you may notice the old fear standing farther back and the ordinary light standing closer by. You may find your door easier to open from both sides. You may catch yourself setting an extra place at the table and not be able to say for whom. Call that visitor what you like. He won't mind. He is busy being yours without belonging to you. Thank you for listening to Sleep with Myth.